Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening to everyone joining us today. Welcome to the International ACAC Webinar Wednesday. Today we'll be talking about creating a compelling conference session. My name is Christina Chandler from Chandler Educational Consulting, and I am happy to introduce our host today, President for International ACAC. And I'm going to let Dan go ahead and take it away and introduce the panel and get us started on this session. Dan?
Thank you so much, Christina. I really appreciate it. Hello, everyone from Los Angeles. It's phenomenal to be with you today. Again, my name is Dan Marshner. I have the privilege of being the president-elect for International ACAC, and it's really a phenomenal opportunity for me to be with you and talk more about the International ACAC Annual Conference in Pittsburgh this summer. Very much looking forward to that wonderful opportunity. And very much excited to be joined by a tremendous panel of experts who can tell you a little bit more about how they've considered the possibility of session proposals in the past and how to really craft and create a compelling session proposal. So these are the phenomenal human beings who are joining us today. And I have given a moment to introduce themselves briefly as well. But again, we'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear if you have any questions as we go throughout the panel, to hear more about the questions you have about this session. But in the meantime, if you, so we'll let Joe and Mel and Mari introduce themselves in just a second. But before we do that, I'll just go back briefly to the previous slide and mention that we'll talk a little bit today about the theme of the conference, which is bridge builders. And I'll talk about that in just a second and why we've chosen that theme. We'll talk a little bit more today as well about the nuts and bolts of actually taking a proposal, how the system works in terms of actually submitting that session proposal, the various formats and possibilities there, just so you understand basically what that all looks like. And then we'll talk more and really rely on the expertise of our phenomenal experts here about really what makes a good proposal, how do you overcome challenges with proposals, maybe ways to connect with other international ACAC members as you're considering proposal ideas. So again, very much looking forward to hearing from them and really connecting with all of you as well. So more than happy to answer any questions as we go, and please, again, put those into the chat. With that being said, just want to take a moment and talk about the theme of the conference, and then we'll have our panelists introduce themselves. So Bridge Builders is relevant to the city of Pittsburgh because Pittsburgh is a city of bridges. It has 3 rivers that really connect the city together. And so there are a ton of opportunities to really connect various parts of the city via these marvels of structural engineering. And so from our perspective, in terms of the International ACAC Conference, it's really an opportunity to think about how all of us act in bridges, as bridges in our work every day. And the way that we connect cultures, we connect communities, we provide opportunities for families and students to think about how they can transition from secondary school to university, maybe crossing seas or going halfway across the world in some cases to be able to find a new opportunity. And so really thinking about the ways that we as a community help to bring people together and help support each other is really crucial to the idea of the conference this year. So that being said, I'll take a moment to have our panelists introduce themselves and maybe talk a little more about what inspires them about the theme. Joe, would you like to go first?
Thanks, Dan, and hope everybody's doing well. My name is Joe Tavares. I work at a school in Jakarta, Indonesia called Jakarta Intercultural School. Yeah, I like this theme, Bridge Builders, a lot. Dan, I'm excited. It's been a while since I've been in Pittsburgh. But, for those who don't know, Pittsburgh's a city with, I think, over 440 bridges. And, at the conference, it's almost, 1,400 or 1,500 people who attend the conference every year. And I like this idea of kind of appropriating our profession of secondary, post-secondary professionals, organizations, folks who work with students in a number of different contexts to, I guess, another profession that, helps bridge the gap, that allows humans to travel from one place to another. And, we go to the conference to learn, connect, grow, and share. But instead of, I guess, steel beams, we have ideas, we have slides, we have anecdotes, we have questions, and some of us, I guess, have answers. And I think probably at the end of that conference, that 3 or 4 day gathering, those bridges extend from Pittsburgh to, over 100 countries around the world. And I think that's just exciting. And so kudos to the team, the leadership team, for identifying a really powerful team that, resonates.
Thanks, Joe. Mari, would you like to expound on that at all? Introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Hi, everyone. My name is Mari Mutz. I work at Colgate University in beautiful upstate New York, where it is a whopping negative some odd degrees outside, and we're bracing for a really fun storm. But tell all your students. I also haven't been to Pittsburgh in a while, but I'm very excited to go back, especially given sort of the state of the world right now. And I recognize that being based in the United States provides various challenges in a variety of ways, but also a lot of opportunities. And I think the the topic of bridge builders and the theme of bridge builders is really relevant right now when we're thinking about how we can mobilize students and mobilize international education in a time where it sometimes feels a little inaccessible or maybe a little is too easy on us. But I do think that coming together in a place like Pittsburgh that brings all these bridges together is such a good metaphor for all of us coming together to really try to find common ground and work towards this goal that we're all trying to get, which is the power of international education and the power of providing an education to students who truly deserve it and want it and know how to make the most of it. And during a time when things are not always really happy on the news, at least where we are, it really allows us to kind of think positively about how we can make the most of all of us being in one space together. I know that every time I come to a conference, it's just so energizing and simultaneously exhausting because of how much energy it is. But the theme Bridge Builders, I think, really gives us an opportunity to kind of think critically about how we can serve as really key components in our students, international education mobility.
Thanks, Mari. Mel, going to introduce yourself and any other thoughts?
Sure. I'm Melanie Element. I'm happy to join you from Montreal, Canada, where it's currently snowing. And I like to say that it's a winter wonderland. This theme of bridge building and kind of brings to mind a lot of infrastructure and how we can be a part of that. How it can be built to weather any storm, especially with what we're experiencing in the world, and how we have to help each other navigate either through different communication conduits by taking information in, because there's always a way to get students and young people where they're going. But sometimes you may have to take an alternate route. Sometimes there's traffic in your way. I know a lot about that being in Montreal and having a lot of bridges, not as many as Pittsburgh. But the reality is that what we do and how we come together to build those long withstanding, iconic kind of structures is a real privilege and something that we can be proud of. So happy to get into it and inspire everyone. And hopefully we'll have a lot of you jumping in and creating proposals very soon.
Thank you very much. So again, in terms of, we'd like to start off with just the basics, and we'll get into more ideas here in just a second. But let's say you are thinking about the idea of creating a session proposal, and you just want to understand what the system looks like and how this would work. So this is the website we use, the system we use called Proposal Space. Just to note, the invitation code here is Bridge26. And just to back up for a second, if there's anything about the proposal submission process that is not clear to you, certainly encourage you to connect with our incredible colleagues at International ACAC. We're really privileged to have our interim executive director with us tonight, for example. And so really helping with answering any of those questions that may come up as we go. But again, the basics are all here in terms of what the system would look like. So you go into the system itself, and then get the opportunity to explore a little bit more about what exactly we're looking for. A few things to highlight here, just to keep in mind that we do have a deadline of Wednesday, February 11th. So we definitely want you to keep that in mind as you're considering your ideas. Typically what we're talking about, just so you know, and we'll see that in just a second, is a few short lines about your idea, as well as some people that you might want to be presenting with, depending upon the format that you are interested in considering. Just to note that as an executive board, International ACAC has decided to try to amplify as many voices as possible amongst the membership. And so we do have a cap of 2 presentations for the conference per person, per member. And so you do want to keep that in mind as well if you're thinking about what could be possible for you. And just to note again that we do have the panelists, the presenters are all current International ACAC members. So we do encourage members to learn from each other, bounce ideas off each other, and to appreciate each other's company from that perspective during the conference. Just to note as well that there is some various things you can think about here in terms of making a good proposal. We'll talk more with the panel about how that can happen. But again, we do encourage you to have a broad range of voices in any kind of session proposal if you are thinking about collaborating. So that's very important to us. We had a point this morning in our previous session of talking about the idea of how important the title is, and we can talk a little more about that, of really trying to capture interest very quickly, but also realistically to make sure that you are describing accurately what you'd like to consider during your session. And so again, really keeping that in mind, that those descriptions, titles, that the understanding of what's happening is really important. And then again, one of the things that's always struck me about International ACAC, and it's been something that's been really wonderful for me to be part of this organization, is its incredibly collaborative nature. And so with that in mind, we do have a Google Sheet that's available to you if you're thinking that you have an idea and you want to balance it out a little bit by having another perspective added to your group. We do have ways for you to do that. And so again, encourage you to consider that possibility as well. But again, those are kind of the basics in terms of what we're looking for from the proposal itself. And then just a note, there are quite a few options here to consider in terms of ways that you could go, in terms of themes, ideas. Certainly encourage you to connect it with the conference theme, if at all possible. But again, there's lots of different ways you can consider the subject matter, the topic that really inspires you. Again, it can be anything from something that might be more of an introductory kind of session, conversation about getting started with international education, or something that might be much more advanced from your perspective in terms of something that you've been considering for a while, or maybe an idea that you've really refined quite significantly. It's really up to you in terms of that perspective. But again, there's lots of variety of topics or ideas that you could consider. And then there's a note as well, there are 3 main formats that are options for you to potentially propose as part of the conference sessions and the conference programming. The first of those is the affinity and discussion groups. And so the note that the affinity groups is mainly focused around an identity for the most part. And so it's an opportunity for you to collect, to get together with people who share that same identity or same perspective. So we've had things like women in leadership, for example, LGBTQIA groups before. Think along those lines, again, people who are really focused on things that have that kind of bind them as people. As opposed to the discussion groups, which are more focused on an idea that's more of a guided conversation. So a theme that you might be, for example, things like credential evaluation, and really talking about best practices from that perspective, or maybe incorporating artificial intelligence into what you do. Those are the kind of more broader kind of conversational opportunities that would be part of that discussion group. The one that's the most common and is the most numerous at the conference itself are the educational sessions. And those are typically anywhere from 2 to 5 members who talk about a topic, an area of interest. So sharing best practices, talking about a theme, bringing different perspectives to whatever that might be. Those are opportunities to be delivered on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday during the sessions and during the main session blocks during the conference. Wednesday and Thursday, as you can see there on the screen. And just a note that we do have about 60 minutes to work with when you're thinking about that. So again, you're thinking about kind of filling a larger amount of time from that perspective. The shortest of the formats we offer are the conference chats. And so those this year will actually be moved into the main conference sessions and during those times, and give an opportunity to have a short, maybe 10, 15 minutes at the most, presentation about a topic of interest to you. So in the past, it's been things like imposter syndrome or learning from failure, or just kind of thinking about those kind of opportunities that may be a little bit different than a full-length session proposal or a full-length session that would be a conversation that would be worth 60 minutes. More of a short presentation, again, 10, 15 minutes about some research you've done or something along those lines. So again, there's a variety of different possibilities here in terms of formats, in terms of the amount of other collaborators you might have with you, and also based upon the various timings. So just to clarify, the affinity and discussion groups will be taking place on Tuesday, education sessions on Wednesday and Thursday, as well as the conference chats on Wednesday and Thursday as well. And so again, in terms of the basics, you will ask to provide a title, a brief description, and you'll choose what format interests you. And then again, to note that you would indicate as best you can who the lead presenter would be and who other additional presenters would be. So that's kind of the basics in terms of what the system might look like. And so from there, we can transition a little bit to just a question for the panel, and that you may have an idea or the start of an idea. How do you get started, and how do you help to develop this idea a little bit further? Mel, maybe we can start with you. Where do you start when you're thinking about a session idea?
I mean, sometimes those conversations are happening right after the conference. So there are some that have been brewing since last summer, and looking forward to kind of getting back to that after a fall, seeing if some of those conversations are relevant. But I always like to think about, with the multitude of ideas, who the audience will be. Who do I see in that room? Who will, get the tools and have the conversations, and how can we make it as inclusive as possible so that it can resonate kind of on both sides of the desk? That can't always happen, but I think a good proposal is kind of able to give pieces, or at least have folks thinking within our community, whether you're on the school side or the university college side. So that's one of the things that I like to do. And then I will usually kind of bounce those ideas off of some of my colleagues, whether they're within my institution or outside. I think in this profession, we all have that kind of benefit of having a really supportive network. And so just there's always a good excuse for a Zoom call, and kind of bouncing ideas together before you kind of get to, okay, this is where I'm going to focus, and expand it from there. So give yourself the time, because I know the deadline is coming soon. Maybe start with some of those conversations right after this and get your ideas flowing.
Okay, great. Marty, what do you think? How do you get started?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is usually formed from organic conversations. I think there's like two elements that I think of. One is like, you're at dinner with colleagues when you're maybe on the road, or people are coming to visit you in your country, and you've had dinner or you're having some drinks, and then that spirals into conversation. You're sort of venting to each other in a sense, and really on the same page about something. And that really spirals into like oh, this is probably a conversation we could have with a lot of other people. And like, maybe it's not reinventing the wheel, because maybe it doesn't need to be that, but it's something that we could spend a lot of time talking about, and it could value a lot of different perspectives. And the other way I sometimes think about it is like, there's something that you explain to your family and friends that are outside of this industry. This is a very unique industry to be in, and a very unique like sub-industry of higher education, especially. And sometimes I find myself describing things to my family or to friends who are not part of this. And I'm like, oh, okay, I understand what I'm talking about. You have no clue, but this is like super valuable for people to understand this. And so maybe this is something that a beginner to this profession would really benefit from, hearing from a variety of voices, coming from a variety of perspectives. So it's oftentimes far more organic in coming up with those kinds of ideas than sitting to think about it and jotting down your top 10 ideas and being like, nope, nope, nope. And maybe that is how you work, but think about those organic conversations, I think.
Great. Any thoughts, Joe? How do you get started?
Yeah. I guess over the years, I've had different opportunities to think about a session proposal. Sometimes, usually it's in January, right? So I know there'll be a timeline slide, but in January, I usually begin to think about, what are the initiatives that I'm proud of that, my team has been doing, that I've been doing with students, in this past semester. And that's great. Sometimes we do things within our schools that we think are replicable or, worthy of sharing, right? Like this idea of like TED Talks, right? Like the ideas we're sharing. That's what, for some of us, these sessions can do. But then other times, I guess I would say that I've thought about, a topic or an idea or, those conversations that we might have with colleagues. And I'm like, I need to know more about this topic. And so I kind of begin to put together a proposal, not feeling like I'm an expert, but I use the session or the conference and, this whole proposal process as a way to kind of incentivize myself because there's nothing more embarrassing than, not knowing what you're talking about in front of a group of colleagues. So I then have, from February to July to become an expert, to surround myself with knowledgeable professionals. And so it's almost like a learning opportunity, which I know sounds a little bit counterintuitive. You're selected to present, but yeah, I guess I use it as a kind of a way to incentivize myself. I think the other thing that I would say beyond, the idea of like beginning to think about what topic is, I sometimes will reach out to one person. Um, it doesn't have to be like somebody, a colleague or somebody who is in my close network. Sometimes you find out, oh, this person is interested in this, whether it's a post they wrote in the Facebook group or you maybe had a conversation with somebody about this and you just reach out and you say, hey, here's this idea I'm thinking about. What do you think about this idea? Does this sound like a session? And more often than not, I found when I reach out to that one person that they have a perspective that is, widens my aperture, if you will, right? Like, so I'm thinking, oh, this is the topic. And then they're like, well, and then this and this and this. And then, that allows me to begin to say, okay, we've got now two. Maybe if that person is interested, or maybe they tell me there's somebody else who would be a better fit. And that's like the beauty of this community, having 3,000 people, like maybe you use that first kind of connection point for another. And then, yeah, then the idea can kind of evolve. And I know we'll talk about other things, but I would just say that for me, it's really important. I'm so glad you guys are doing this webinar in January because we still have about a month to think about what would that idea be? What would you be actually? What would your 3 to 4 sentence description of it to be? Who would be my co-presenters? And I think that would be the advice I would give anybody is you don't have to make a decision today, but I think if you set a goal to figure out what topic or topics might be interesting, who might be one person that could kind of begin to go on this journey with you and go from there.
Great, thank you. Okay, so let's say you have the basics of an idea, and you're trying to figure out how to refine it or maybe overcome some challenges with it. So how do you do that? So again, you've got a little bit, you've started, but maybe you're not quite sure how to move it to the next phase. Joe, what do you think about that? What's those things kind of, you started to talk about this already, but what are some things you think about in terms of getting it to that next point?
Okay. So let's pretend for a minute that, when you're getting feedback, the only person, you're getting feedback in the beginning is like you're living inside your head, right? And so you've got to get at least one other person to share their perspective. I think, and that can be hard, right? We don't always have those networks. We might not know who to turn to, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But I usually will work hard in these first couple weeks of January to begin to figure out what's the idea, who might be interested, and then I'll try my best to organize a meeting, like a virtual meeting with everybody. And I know that can be hard, especially when we're in different time zones. But I found that that's super important because we need to really make sure that the idea is valuable, right? Like the session is not going to be selected if we don't really have an idea that is clear, if we don't have some of those basics down. And so I think I'll just mention this again. Sometimes I will present with somebody I know, and sometimes I will present with somebody I don't know, right? So that is an exciting opportunity, but I have found that it's, you don't want to have your first interaction actually, okay, hey, we're going to present together in February, and then the first time we meet is the day of our session, right? So I try to schedule a virtual meeting so we can all, become comfortable with each other. Even if our session isn't accepted, that's fine. We've made a positive relationship. We've made an effort. So I would just say that the impetus would be to try to find out at least 1 or 2 people who are going to be interested. And if you can, I have found it is so helpful to come together to really flesh out, discuss that session description, figure out what's that title that you're going to come up with. Who's this going to be for? That's not easy, but I think that just begins the working relationship of that group of people.
Great, thanks, Joe. So Marty, again, how do you go from that initial idea to helping to refine that a little further?
Yeah, sometimes I think it's most helpful to talk to people who are not as knowledgeable on the topic as you are, because if you can explain it to them in a way that is really concise and clear and they understand what your goal is, um, you've done a pretty good job because they're not familiar with the content anyway, right? And so a couple of years ago when I had submitted a proposal, I had talked to one of my colleagues it was like their first or second week in our office, and they were brand new to the admission world. And I was like, this is a really good learning opportunity for both of us. Tell me what you think about this, honestly. And she was like, I don't want to give you feedback. And I was like, I'm asking you for feedback right now. And it actually challenged both of us to be able to have that conversation. And she was like, right. So I actually didn't understand when you said X, Y, and Z. And I was like, oh, that's such a good thing. I never would have thought of that because I'm so in the weeds of this. And so to Joe's point, sometimes you really get really in the weeds of the topic that you're thinking about because you go to bed thinking about it and then you wake up and you're like, I have to add this one line, otherwise it's not going to be great. Or you start throwing a whole bunch of stuff into AI and then it spitballs things and you're in a whole new realm of the world. And so sometimes really just like sitting down and having a conversation with somebody who's a little bit removed to kind of flesh out some of the ideas can be really helpful just in your brain processing. I know I'm a really collaborative person, so I like working with other people, but I think it's really just about like refining the point that you want to get across and making sure that's very clear.
Oh, great. Mel, any additional thoughts? How do you make an initial idea better?
I mean, I agree with everything that's been said right now. It's a great way to address it. One of the other things that I will draw inspiration from previous sessions, like go back, whether it's the same topic or not, just to see maybe titles that are appealing, how I can refine it, and looking back to sessions that I've attended and took a lot away from, and knowing that this might be your first attempt, this might be your second attempt, but you have a voice, you have an idea, and sometimes you just have to try again. But I'm also really inspired when Mari's talking about ask someone who doesn't really know what it is. If I could keep my 9-year-old's attention for a good 5 minutes explaining a topic, I think I might be onto something.
Absolutely. Okay, great. And again, just some more ideas about how to really make this work. But one of the questions we talked about this morning or in the previous session was, maybe a session that's stuck with you. Maybe even it's been a couple of years ago. What is it about? What makes a session memorable? What makes a session impactful from your perspective? Mel, you want to start with that one?
Yes. So I have one that I'm not going to say the whole title of because I did look it up this time. So a really colorful title from last year. And it was about career mistakes. And so that had Jason Smith, Marsha Oshima, so some powerhouse names. But it was really refreshing because it had a really human tone to it. And I think sometimes it's hard to admit your mistakes and then going into those stories, those personal stories and what they learned from it, that you never make that same mistake again. And so I found that a great conversation starter within the room and then afterwards. So that's one that stuck with me from last year, and that colorful title definitely drew me in.
Okay. Mari, anything a memorable session for you?
Yeah. So earlier at our last session, I had looked up the title and Mel was talking about a title that she hadn't looked up. And this time I didn't look up the title. So here we are. But I think the title is actually so important because in many ways, it can be the thing that either grabs your eye or it can be the thing that makes you scroll right past it and say, no, that's not for me. Or maybe there's not a session during this that I want to actually go to. And so obviously don't lose sleep over it because I think all of us have a lot more important things to do than lose sleep over a title of a session proposal. And if not, tell me your tips. But I do think that some of the most captivating sessions I've gone to I found through the titles. I went to one last year. It was the very last session of the conference. I almost did not go, and I'm so glad I did. It ended up being a really great conversation about being a parent in this industry, and taking your job from being an international educator to a parent, and how those two things can coexist. And as a new parent myself, I was kind of lost and looking for even just people to tell me how to like not miss my child when I left. Spoiler alert, I did not get that answered. I'm still looking for that, but it was a really impactful and powerful conversation. And I think sometimes you go into these sessions and you think, oh, they can't tell me what I need to know about this. But sometimes it's really just about talking, having the right people in the room that are as passionate about the topic as you are, and being able to have a conversation. And so sessions aren't necessarily just you talking at people, but allowing for that interaction and allowing for people to kind of build community and build bridges within the sessions that you're attending. And I found a really awesome network of other parents who travel and work in this industry, and we have a group chat going and everything. And sometimes it's just like, okay, I miss my child, send me a picture of something on the street so that I like, bring my mind somewhere else. And it's just been a really powerful tool for all of us, I think, and for anybody to be able to understand that this industry is very human too. And I think that human component is really what drew me to that session too.
Thank you. Joe, any memorable session for you?
Yeah, I'm looking at the slide right now and thinking about, sometimes the title of this is, about kind of crafting a session proposal, but I can't help but think about that last bullet on the screen, which is talking about, the overall experience and impact. So I just want to acknowledge that our focus right now is kind of maybe encouraging individuals to put together a session proposal, finding individuals who they'll co-present with. But sometimes in the session description, you are alluding to what the experience is going to be. So Mari's just talking about, that last session of the day, and it becomes kind of a conversation rather than, as you see there, like a stand and deliver presentation, right? And so I just would acknowledge, and that maybe not everybody has gone to the conference, or, you've had different experiences, or maybe you've attended a conference. I think it's important to know that you do have some agency in choosing how the experience is. Like, what is the interaction piece? Like, sometimes people are looking to say, oh, you know what? I'm putting in so much effort into this, or I really want, hundreds of people to attend my session. But I have found over the years that some of the best experiences that I've had, similar to what Mari's saying, there was like 20 people in the room, and it was actually a conversation. So I say that to kind of take a little bit of pressure out from anybody who's on the fence of, should I do a session? Am I ready? You're ready. The fact that you came and you joined us wherever you are means that this matters to you. So I think you should consider, the topic, but begin to realize that you have agency and you can be creative. Not all of us had the fortune of being classroom teachers or trainers, if you will, in terms of that. But that is a skill that you can develop, and you can use this conference as an opportunity to really engage colleagues and peers and those who are interested in the topic that you are, in whatever way you want, right? Like, there are different room sizes, there's different ways of being there. So I would want to acknowledge that, and potentially, think about, is that the delivery of the experience or the delivery of content? Are you just going to be sharing slides? Is it going to be case studies? Are there going to be, small group conversations, whatever it is? Maybe you consider in your session description saying like what this will look like. And I think not just for the attendees who will see it on the app, but for you yourself and your co-presenters to begin to think about, like, what are we actually trying to do?
Great, thank you. Okay, so I really appreciate the examples you shared. Generally, they're all very positive, very sessions that really were memorable for a lot of good reasons. I wonder if we could shift tracks a little bit and talk about maybe sessions there or proposals you've seen that have not been very good, or have not really been helpful, or haven't really worked, and maybe some things to avoid. Can you want to start with that one, Joe? Maybe something that just didn't seem to come together the way that you'd hoped.
Yeah, so I want to just make sure I'm like, you asked the question very clearly, but I just want to make sure it's clear where my answer is coming from. So yeah, over the years, I've had the opportunity to review session proposals. So it's a group of members who, care about and want to make sure we have a good slate and a diverse group of individuals, and that we're not having 20 sessions on the same topic, right? That there is like some actual thoughtfulness that goes into how we slate the conference. And so I would just say that a thing I've noticed, which is kind of why I said this earlier, but if there is a session proposal and it just has one person on it, and that person's like, oh, I'm going to find a university, I'm going to have another high school counselor, I'm going to have an organizational member on it. Like, not that I don't believe that that's going to happen, but when you're comparing that unfinished kind of product to somebody else who actually has things kind of fleshed out and has a diverse group of professionals, or that there's going to be different perspectives. I think the session that is like fully fleshed out versus the one that says TBD, TBD doesn't win, right? No matter how interesting the session is, it feels unfinished. And when you're comparing the sessions, that I would just acknowledge is like yeah, I don't know how to say it clearer than that. It's just, do the work over the next month. And yes, I'm sure there are, sessions that, we can appreciate that maybe you don't have that fourth or third panelist, but if it's just you on the session, that I would discourage you from, I would encourage you. Let me use the other side. I would encourage you to find those co-presenters and get them to sign on. And you know what? Like, this is being recorded, and I probably shouldn't say this, but like, even if you get a guarded yes, I think I can do it, put their name down, okay? But just don't put just don't put TBD. Like, I know sometimes we can all say, they're not sure. Should I just but that's not a good example of TBD. Okay, I've said enough.
Great, thanks. So yeah, maybe if it's one person, you have a great idea, maybe that's more of a conference chat, right? And think about the format, that's one possibility. Mari, again, maybe something, lessons learned from things that just didn't work.
Yeah, I think when you're thinking about the audience and who is going to be there, you're not trying to deliver something that everybody already knows or can look up, right? Like, I'm going to pick on the liberal arts for a second because I think I'm allowed to. You don't have to come to this conference and present about the value of a liberal arts education, because if we're at this conference, we've at least heard of it and maybe we want to have a conversation about it. You don't need to enlist a group of liberal arts panelists, and I'm not trying to pick on the liberal arts, but I am, because I see it a lot. And you don't want to like try to deliver that message. Maybe that's a message that you have a webinar for with some of your friends and you advertise it out elsewhere. But I really think this is the ones that do go much better than others are those that are providing sometimes really data-backed information to the audience, where they can say, I've collected data on X topic, or I will collect data on X topic from 55 universities or 55 high school counselors or whatever it is, and present that so that it can be the basis of our conversation. And that's not to say that every conversation is a data back conversation, because I think there's a time and place for it. But I think some of the theoretical components of it can allow people to go off on tangents and can allow for a session proposal to look a little disjointed at times. And so spinning that on the positive, I think really thinking clearly through what the message and conversation you want people to be walking out of the door with is more important than sometimes the actual like deliverable that you're giving, in a sense.
Thanks. Mel, any thoughts? Is something that just didn't work? How to avoid that?
I think sometimes it's getting caught up in having like a really big idea and you want to fit so much into it because, like Mari said, you can go on tangents. I think you have to really refine what you're trying to deliver. And we talked a little bit about this morning, is that are individuals walking away with tools? Is this something that they can share or implement? So you might not be able to get all of your ideas out in one session. Again, it's a finite amount of time, and conversations can happen afterwards. And like, that is the example I give of a successful session. is everyone kind of leaving and there's chatter and there's noise and the conversations are still happening? So it's, having a good idea, but not trying to cram everything into that session because the conversations can happen afterwards.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again. This is really, really insightful. And again, thanks for that note, Christina. Again, I'm certainly happy to have any questions from the audience as well that would like to contribute here. Just a couple of things to note. We've already referenced this as well. We do have a resource on the conference website that does list previous conference sessions. So again, if you are looking to be inspired by maybe something, a new fresh perspective on a topic that was been considered before, or maybe building upon a previous year's session or those along those lines, certainly encourage you to take advantage of this resource and see what's available to you from that perspective. And Joe mentioned a little bit about the timeline here, so I just want to make sure we're all understanding what that looks like in terms of the review process. So again, just want to reiterate that February 11th is a deadline to submit the conference proposals. And again, so certainly encourage you to really take advantage of the next few weeks and really to refine your ideas until then. As Joe referenced, we do have a phenomenal group of members who act as our session review committee, who help to provide feedback about the session proposals and kind of give us a sense of what they feel would be the best sessions that would be available for the conference. And again, that review process will take place between February and March. And so again, just keep that in mind as well. Thank you for sharing that. And in the chat as well, there's the link for the past conference sessions. Thank you. And then we will let the people who have indicated interest in hosting and presenting a session know in March that they have been accepted to be able to present. And so that'll be an exciting time for those who are selected. And then we'll go from there, and you'll have the opportunity to really collaborate with your peers for the next couple of months or so. And so again, just to note, there is a very brief abstract, a very brief description of your idea initially as part of the session proposal process. This has been an opportunity for you to actually refine that, to work more closely with your co-presenters in a way that ultimately you can have that session proposal available to International ACAC in June of 2026, so a few weeks before the actual conference itself. The reason why we ask you to submit that session proposal a little bit earlier is because we want to make sure it's available on the conference app, that we have a description for your session in the conference program, things like that. And then again, Joe's point, our hope as an organization is that you are not having your first interaction with your panelists at the session right before the session begins, but that you have a chance to connect with them beforehand. But regardless, we're very much excited to hear your perspectives and hear you share your expertise in Pittsburgh in July of 2026. So hopefully that all makes sense in terms of the submission timeline. And again, it makes for a busy few months, but an exciting one as well as we kind of think about the ideas that we share with our peers. So with that being said, we've had a few questions already to the panel. And we want to make sure that we have a little bit of time for questions from the audience as well. But we've talked about a lot of different topics so far. Is there anything that we haven't talked about yet that you'd want to make sure that we discussed? Anything that we haven't mentioned yet, Joe? Do you want to start off? Anything we haven't discussed yet they want to make sure you share?
Yeah, I was just thinking, Dan. I think we've talked about a lot. I think something that I mentioned this earlier, but sometimes you aren't sure who would be interested in this topic or this session idea. I think that can be hard, right? Like that will help you, I think, get a little bit of inertia. So I would say that maybe I'll focus on that third one, the how do you find collaborators, additional perspectives. I just put in the chat a resource that I think is super helpful. I know that International ACAC has been doing it for a number of years now, and it's to basically achieve what I was just saying. It's like, how do you find your fellow collaborators? So you see, I just put in the chat a Google Doc, and it shows different working session ideas, and there aren't many in it yet, but I'm quite certain that in the coming days and weeks, you'll see more, especially coming out of this webinar. So I would just say, be brave. take some time later today or this weekend and begin to flesh out that idea. And you're basically announcing to the community that you're looking for fellow collaborators. And over the years, I've seen people be brave, put their ideas down, that session idea, and then other names come, and those more often than not are not people who knew that. So that's one idea. Another idea that I think we sometimes take for granted is over the course of a school year, you will interact with other professionals, right? And an example of this is like maybe you work at a high school and there are university representatives who are coming to your school. And sometimes, you're talking about your students or you're talking about their university, and maybe you exchange other pleasantries. Well, there are, for those who are getting those visits, maybe reaching out to that university representative and say, hey, here's a session that is, I'm thinking about, I really enjoyed our conversation earlier this year, or maybe it was a couple years ago. Do you know anybody who would be interested in this topic, right? That's a way to grow your network in an organic way. Another, if we're speaking about somebody from a university, it's the same thing, right? Like sometimes, who is going to be provide that high school perspective. Maybe it's again a high school counselor who you met during your travels during this recruitment season, and that's a way to deepen that relationship. So I just say that sometimes we can get guilty of living in our own kind of networks or our own kind of communities, our own schools, but use this as an opportunity to reach out, send that email to somebody who you met in this school year, or even a couple school years. Like, it is not weird in this profession to reach out to somebody who you met 2 or 3 years ago. Like, I think that needs to be normalized. And so I know that can be the friction point of not having those fellow collaborators, but that's your responsibility to kind of do that work and reach out to that one person, and then ask them if they can think about somebody. That's how a session will grow and ensure diverse perspectives.
Great, thanks, Joe. Marty, anything that we haven't talked about yet? You want to make sure we discuss?
I think we've touched on a lot, and Joe just hit on a lot as well. But I think the only thing I'd add is just harping on the fact that people are really happy to share their perspective. And I don't think you'd ever offend anybody by shooting them a cold email and saying, hey, I know that we've met only in passing once or twice, but I love this conversation. I'd love to collaborate with you on this. Think about if you would get that email, like, oh, wow, I feel really great that somebody said that to me. And so just like, don't be afraid to send that email. And if you do, or if you're kind of in a place where you're like, I want to present on something, I haven't really ironed this topic out, I had a conversation, let me see if I can get 30 minutes on their calendar and just talk with them and see where this can go. You don't have to be afraid to kind of like make that connection. Also, the Facebook group is really a great resource, and you can like search in there. I know this is like, I'm not trying to like explain how to use Facebook, but you can search in the Facebook group of topics and you can see who's like responded to different posts, and maybe you shoot them. I think it's a DM or a message or something. See, I shouldn't be telling people how to use Facebook. But shoot them a message and just say, hey, I saw 2 years ago that you were talking about this topic, and I know that you're still a member. I'd love to continue this conversation in this sense now too. So there's just like so much stuff on your computer that you can use aside from AI, or maybe use it or submit a topic about it.
Anything else you want to add, Mel?
I think we've been pretty thorough. So I don't have much to add on that. I think a lot of it has been fleshed out. Again, just echoing. Sometimes it can be, inviting somebody onto a session proposal can be what gets them to the conference because they're able to present that opportunity to their higher ups, and suddenly they can attend a conference that they didn't think they were going to be able to. So definitely reach out and connect.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Christina shared in the chat here, so thank you for this question. Can we swap co-presenters after submitting the proposal in case someone is not available? Yes, that is certainly possible from my perspective. I don't know if any of you have had experiences where you've had to scramble and kind of get presenters to be part of a session in the past. But yes, we definitely are flexible from that perspective. We know life happens, and in some cases, a co-presenter who had every intention of coming is unfortunately not able to attend. Any of you had experience like that before? Mari, it seems like you're shaking your head. And how did you resolve that issue?
We still, it was at the conference at Western University a couple of years ago, and one person wasn't able to get their visa like pretty last minute. And so we had kind of like gone forward with them as a panelist, and we ended up like recording clips of them giving their input. And so I know this is like a little bit different in that sense. And when it like came around, we just played their clips so that they were still part of it because they still put a lot of work in. And then there was actually the same panel where another person could not come because of a visa, and they were able to send somebody else with a different passport. And so we kind of plug and played them a little bit. And so sometimes it's just about like we all are very good problem solvers and just kind of problem solving. But if it happens in March, that gives you a lot more time than it does a month before the conference.
Absolutely. And again, just ask more. Any other questions from the audience? We're happy to address those. We are coming to the end of the time we have for the webinar, and so I know I've asked briefly, but anything again, any final thoughts that any of you would like to share, just to inspire people to consider making a session proposal?
I think it's worth the leap. It's a good exercise. So, you know, no matter what, if you're a first timer or and you're inspired and you're here already, it's a great way again to meet people and have conversations even before you get to the conference with that Google with the Google sheet too. Like that's gonna bring some ideas together. And you've got a bit of a runway right now. So I think you're positioning yourself really well to put your best effort forward.
I was going to say a very similar thing. Just don't be afraid to like submit it. It's not a silly topic if you're thinking about it as an educator. We're probably all thinking about it at some point. And even if it doesn't get accepted, it's not a personal dig at anybody. It's just that there's so many really great ideas brewing in this organization. I think that's what makes it such a powerful place to be as a professional, especially in this industry. And you just use it as a stepping stone and a bridge to get to kind of the next place in your career, whether that's submitting a proposal and it not getting through or using it to push you to learn something for next time as well.
Great. Anything you want to add, Joe?
Just want to thank everybody for joining us. I think that, like I said earlier, the fact that you joined means you're interested. And if it's not this year, maybe it's a future year. But I think, yeah, just gratitude for this conference only happens and functions when people actually put together sessions and put in the effort and enthusiasm. So just want to thank International ACAC for the opportunity and everybody for joining. I think it's important we do this each year.
Thank you so much. And thank you to the three of you. It's really been a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate the opportunity to connect with you. And go ahead and pass it on to Christina. And if anything to do for wrapping up the webinar. But again, thank you so much, just to echo Joe's thoughts. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much for considering this opportunity. And we're very much looking forward to seeing you in Pittsburgh. But Christina, if you want to wrap us up.
Sure. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, everybody, for participating. And I would echo everything that the panel has said. Go ahead and put in those proposals. It's worth a shot. So keep in mind that we have our International ACAC membership that is renewable right now. If you haven't renewed your membership for this year, there should be an email in your inbox. Keep an eye out for that. And there will be regional events in addition to the annual conference. There are 3 regional events this year. The first one coming up soon in April in Vietnam. Then there's another regional in Costa Rica in September and in India in October. I had to remember all 3 of those. So keep those in mind. If you're looking for a little smaller session or it's closer to home, keep in mind one of those regional events, but certainly you've got the big annual conference in July in Pittsburgh, and hopefully we'll see everybody there. So thank you all, and I think we'll wrap up here. And the slides will be shared. This will be recorded. It'll be available on the International ACAC website in a few days.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.